Virtual Mix Rack ships with a ton of great presets. Now, there are two, broadly speaking, categories of presets. We have rack presets that are handled through the top preset bar over here, and these call up presets pertaining to the entire rack. They'll call up several modules with their own settings. And then we have module presets handled in the header of each slot, and we get to them through the preset label. Now, let's start with rack presets. They're organized into banks and then presets. So for example, I have a drum bus soloed now. I'll call up one of these rack presets and they call up a series of modules and we can hear it. And we can, of course, navigate by means of the menu there, or we can use the next previous buttons. So lots of really nice rack presets. Now we can modify these and we can save or save as using the commands over here. So I haven't modified this at all, but let's say I'm going to adjust some of the settings, for example. And I want to save this as a new version. I can hit save and it'll update. We see the little asterisk indicating that it's been modified. So we can hit save and it'll update the preset, or save as, and we get a preset menu over here where we can determine which bank we want it in, give it a name, and then give it some different information that we want there. I'm not going to save it as for now, but that's how you do it. Now we also have a menu over here that we get where we can manage the banks and presets. So we can rename the bank if we want. Instead of drums, we can call it something else. We can delete banks, export banks, and import banks. And the exporting and importing is great if you're working on different platforms. You'll be able to move your presets around between different plugin formats on different platforms. And then pertaining to the actual preset, we have preset information, for example, here, and we can modify it there if we want. And we have additional information here. We can rename a preset, delete a preset. And this is interesting. We can load the presets into A and B, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. Now, let's look at module presets. We call them up from within the headers here. So, for example, for this EQ, I can call up this one. So obviously I'm affecting only the settings for the individual modules. There's different presets available for each of these slots and modules that are loaded in. Now we can save as, delete, and manage the module-based presets directly from here. We can go save as, and of course we'll get the menu to name them, and we can delete them, and we can reset them to a default, which is their default state. Now we can work with two different snapshots of this mixer setup, and we access those via these A and B buttons. So right now this is the A snapshot, and if I go to B it'll be blank, and that's where this menu comes in. We can reload something into one of the slots. So for example, I can go back to A here, and I'll go load to B, and if I go to B now, I'll have a duplicate of it, and I can maybe modify some of the settings here, and I can maybe then A-B them just by moving like that. So one way of managing different settings. Now another thing you can do is use this arrow button to copy what's in one snapshot to the other. So for example, if I do that, now B will be a duplicate of A. And I can then, again, tweak some of the parameters and use the duplicate as a starting point. Another thing I can do is just load in a completely different preset into one of the slots. So for example, that's B and that's A. So I can quickly move between them and see what I like better. Now we can manage these rack presets with the default menu over here. There's a couple of options and they're not obvious. When we use the set current as default, what it does is it sets the current rack setup that we have in front of us as a default that'll be called up automatically whenever a new instance of the virtual mix rack is instantiated. So I could, for example, set this as a starting chain that'll be called up by default. Now when we go restore factory as default, when you invoke this, it does nothing at the beginning. I'll do that, and it looks like it hasn't done anything. But what it's done is it's initialized the default setting to be the default empty rack so that the next time you instantiate a new version of the plugin, a default empty rack is called up. And the third setting over here, reset to default, it resets the rack to the current default preset. And that's either an empty rack if nothing was chosen with the set current as default, or the rack that's stored with the set current as default. So if I do it now, it's going to default to an empty rack because that's what my default is. So again, just to recap, this will set whatever rack setup you have as the default that's called up automatically. This one will reset that default to be the empty rack next time it's loaded up. And this one resets the current rack to the state that's set here, which is either a custom rack or nothing. So that's a little overview of the presets. I'll see you for more in the next video.